Lars Enarson here with an update in the war in Israel, day 647. It is the 14th of July. So yesterday, July 13, began the very difficult time period on the biblical calendar for Israel called the time between dire straits. It is the time period of 21 days between the fast in the 4th month and the fast in the 5th month, mentioned in the book of Zechariah. And this is a time, just like I mentioned in my previous update, where Satan usually comes before God and demands to be able to tempt Israel, just like it is explained in 1 Chronicles 21 and verse 1. It was actually during this time period in 2005 that the expulsion of all the Jews in Gaza took place. It was scheduled to be held on the final day of the 21 days, which is the most solemn day on the Jewish calendar, called Tisha B'Av. But when the government of Israel discovered that it was scheduled to take place on Tisha B'Av, they postponed it to the following day. But the connection was there so obvious. This is the anniversary or the day that both the first and the temples were destroyed. And of course, this tragic expulsion of all the Jews in Gaza in 2005 laid the foundation for the genocide and the atrocity that Hamas committed against Israel on October 7, 2023, which began the present war. So it was a very, very serious mistake, and it happened because of very, very strong pressure from the President of the United States at that time, George W. Bush Jr., who was considered to be a very Christian and Israel-friendly president. Nevertheless, he pressured Israel into this disastrous deal to create peace in Gaza by forcing all the Jews to leave. That was not God's will, and it had such tragic consequences, leading to so much suffering for Israel during these years. One of the sticking points in the negotiations in 2005 was the control of the southern border of Gaza towards Egypt. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon was very adamant that Israel has to control that border in order to move out from Gaza. Well, the United States prevailed. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice at that time, she came up with a compromise and said, we will let an international force led by the UN, I believe it was, to control that border. So she forced Israel to give up that demand. Well, it took only a few weeks until all those international forces were gone, and that border became the way for Hamas to arm themselves for the tragic consequences that happened on October 7. So we see a similar scenario right now. It is Qatar and Egypt that has proposed this ceasefire for 60 days, but it is heavily supported by President Trump. He wants this to be implemented, and not only a ceasefire, he wants the war in Gaza to end. Well, Israel cannot agree to end the war unless Hamas is defeated and gone from Gaza. And this is what both Qatar and Egypt want to prevent. They are the patrons of Hamas. They are the ones who have brought Hamas to power in Gaza and equipped them with the military resources to attack Israel. So will Israel be able to do what is right this time, or will Israel give in to President Trump, who is now forcing a similar deal on Israel, which has very good intentions that there should be peace and Hamas should be gone, but it cannot happen if certain conditions are not met. And the latest thing that has happened now is that Hamas is refusing the conditions that Israel has agreed to in the proposal from Qatar and Egypt. Nevertheless, President Trump says, I believe we can solve this with this week. So the situation is this: will Israel be forced to give up those basic demands that they have? And will the war, almost 2 years long now, be all in vain because Hamas will remain in power in Gaza? It is a time period that is so very serious. There are very strong parallels between 2005 and what is happening right now. We don't pretend to know exactly what God's will is, but it is certainly a time for us to cry out to God and pray that Israel will not give in to wrong advice, because it will have such tragic consequences. Another thing that is now also important to mention is that during this 3-week time period, the time between dire straits, this difficult time for Israel, France and Saudi Arabia are now planning to have a conference, an international conference in New York, in order to push for the two-state solution. This was originally planned to be held at the end of June, but because of the war with Iran, it was postponed, and it's now set for July 28 and 29, once again during this very difficult time period for Israel. So that is another thing that we need to watch for very diligently in prayer, crying out to God as watchmen on the walls of Jerusalem. We are not called to be spectators of what is happening in the news. We are called to be actively involved, crying out to God day and night, reminding God of His promises. That's what it says in Isaiah 62, verse 6 and 7. So thank you for not being slack in your prayers during this time, and encourage other friends to join us in praying that God's will be done, and that Israel will not give in to wrong advice from so-called friends. There must not be another division of the land of Israel, and we have to pray and watch. So God bless you, and thank you for being involved here in prayer, standing with us in intercession for Israel. Shalom. Lars Enarson here.